we go. We are live. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Vagabond Dog Industry Chats. This week's guest, we have Josh, better known as Stuffed Wombat, across the internet, game developer. Let's see. You made a game called QOMP, which I recently played. I played it through it this weekend, but I've also played it before. We'll get to that in a bit. It is a adventure puzzle game set in like if you took Pong and tried to turn it into like an adventure puzzle game. I think that's the best way I can describe this thing. Yeah, it's a very inventive game that sticks with a single mechanic, but every single level has some new twist that really keeps the gameplay fresh. It doesn't really doesn't never wears out its welcome, or repeats itself in a bad way. I hope that's can you improve the pitch here, because I think I'm murdering it right now.
I don't fucking know. It's like for years I've tried to describe it, and it's always like I don't know. Like it makes sense when you play it, but is it a platformer? I don't like. It doesn't have gravity, right? There's no jump. It like I don't know. It's an abstract game. It makes its own rules, and then it plays exclusively with those rules for its whole runtime.
Right.
And
Do you
that's
find
it.
it like
This is
like do you feel like disserviced by the game itself for its difficulty to be explained?
sorry. I didn't get that.
So like when
Disservice?
a game idea comes to me, right? Sometimes it's super easy to explain, and other times it's super uneasy to explain. I think that I often believe that the creative desire to make something is outside of our own ability to like discern whether or not it's easy or hard to explain. Do you so I'm
Yeah.
curious how you feel about the fact that your game is sometimes hard to explain.
I mean, to an extent, most of my games, like I've made a lot of like free browser stuff, and they're all not concerned with explaining themselves because
Mm-hmm.
like the way you approach them is you just click on it like Newgrounds, you go like, oh, this looks interesting, and then 5 minutes later you're playing it already. So why the fuck should I explain it to you? Like you know what it is.
Mm-hmm.
By the time it's like important to know what it is. Um, and I think I've kind of kept that approach of like why should I explain my game to you? Or like to anyone. Like it should stand on its own legs, kind of.
Right.
So like I mean, yeah, sometimes there's projects that are easy to explain, but like what the game is or like ends up being is not as important to me as like why I want to make it. And I cannot like sell you a game with like, oh, here's this game, and you should buy it because I really want to make it for these reasons. And then I talk for an hour. Like nobody's gonna care about that. So I just skip the whole pitching part and hope that people play it because it looks interesting or like exciting.
That is it's a refreshing take, because I've heard from so many developers that like the player actually starts playing your game the second they hear about it, right? The preconceptions that they start brewing in their mind ultimately are going to impact how they experience the game, right? And so to kind of like not give a shit about that part and surrender, I guess, the player entirely to the game. I guess do you feel like it's a confidence, or is it just like something you don't want to do because it's like you want the game to stand on its own, or like what is it, arrogance? What is the why don't you give a shit about it?
I mean, I have to not give a shit about it because I consistently fail to explain why the stuff I make is interesting. Like when I tried to explain Quomp to people, I was like, yeah, like I had this pitch where I was like, yeah, it's Pong, but you play the ball, and that's like a good
Right.
pitch, but it doesn't really describe the gameplay experience, right? It's like a
Mm-hmm.
fake fantasy that you put on top of the thing, and of course that makes it easier to like sell it, to have that fantasy, like you said, to like draw people in, to like create those preconceptions, and then people play with them in their head. But I don't know. It's not like in general. I'm not really comfortable with marketing, and I feel like that part of development, or that part of like pitching, or like presenting your game falls into marketing, and I have something inside of me that like pushes against that, and that
Right.
doesn't want to engage with me. So, like, if I gave a shit about that stuff, like if I allowed myself to really deeply care about that, I would have to be sad all the time because I fucking suck at it. So it's like a
Ah,
defense thing.
it's a necessity. I get it. Okay,
Yeah.
because there's parts of me that like I fluctuate very heavily between like, God, I gotta pitch and sell and like market the shit out of my thing, and then other periods of my development career, I'm just like I'm very much I do not care. If people understand this is the way it has to be because this is what the game demands it becomes. Um, what do you know what that part of you is that hates the marketing? What is it? What do you feel when life tells you, I guess, that you have to start selling your game?
Um, I don't like it because it's related to money and because it's related to lies. It's like, um, it works, right? But then it starts to influence my development processes, and it definitely has. Like the project I'm working on now is kind of a response in a sense to QOMP and how QOMP turned out, where I'm trying to make something that's like much more visually distinct and kind of attention grabbing because of marketing reasons, because I need to sell a certain amount of units to be able to like exist.
Right.
um, but yeah, but I don't want to what you said before was really very correct with the thing, like people start playing the game in their head,
Mm-hmm.
and if I tell them something and then the game doesn't meet those standards, it's like always extremely horrible when that happens to me. Like it has happened to me recently with like I'm not gonna say which game, but where like for like years it was in development. I was like, oh wow, this is gonna be really cool because it set up this like huge block of like people who are into AAA games get this every day, I
Right.
guess, where they get promised heaven and then they play it and it's like here's a grind fest. Like here's this thing that sure maybe if you look at it from a certain perspective, it actually fulfills its promises, but it's like gameplay is actually something completely different that you have to read into that where like you have to do the work. I just think that's bullshit. Yeah.
The I get the sense that you really you have a fear about disappointing the player, not just for the fact that they're not going to like your game. Does 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 the commerce aspect of it have it, like you paid money for this? If I disappoint you, what does that mean? Or I guess what to
Hmm.
you? What does that mean? I think about this one sometimes.
Yeah. It sucks when you disappoint people, I guess, right? Like I don't want to disappoint yeah, I don't want to disappoint people. So I try to be very clear about like the scope and like the intention of the project in terms of gameplay length and like gameplay
Mm-hmm.
depth and stuff like that. Because of a game that I released with a couple of friends. It was called Gut Whale, which had like a skewed presentation in that sense, and was like pretending to be something that it essentially wasn't.
Right.
And it's not like that. That game still has like over 90% positive reviews, but it just made me feel sad that some people couldn't enjoy that game because they went into it with the wrong expectations.
Right. Right.
I don't know if I'm answering these questions.
No,
It's like this is something I haven't really figured out for myself. So I'm like completely drifting off into
totally
my own
fair.
thoughts.
It's fine. That's kind of what we do here. It is yeah, disappointing players sucks. I've had that
Hmm.
experience where like people have gone in with certain expectations and certain hopes. I had a 5 year period where people were able to conceptualize what my game would be in their own head, right? And then when we finally come to launch and it's something different, uh, it's not what they
Yeah.
wanted. I don't know how to manage changing. I feel like it's a lost cause at that point. I'm wondering if you agree. Like if somebody's gone in with to something, it's like if you've been told a movie sucks, you're probably never going to earnestly enjoy it. Like at best, you can hope for ironic enjoyment, but like and I'm wondering if you agree or if you think like over time opinions of games can change.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's a whole other topic. But like, I feel if someone tells you a game sucks, and then you're like, no, fuck you. This game's great. Like, because I fucking hate you. I'm gonna enjoy this game just to spite you. I think that's happening quite a lot with like people where they go like, oh yeah, like oh the Blizzard games are made with like blood of
Mm-hmm.
people, and then a certain subgroup of people will just go like, fuck you, you can't ruin the enjoyment. I will now exclusively play Blizzard games or whatever,
Right,
right?
right, right.
There's like a certain anti-reaction.
At that point, we're not even playing the game though. We're playing each other's emotion. Like
Yeah,
it, it's a
yeah,
social meta game, not the actual.
that's what PlayStation and Xbox did like 10 years ago. They were like, our console is a way of life. And
Right.
like if you look at the comments on their tweets, it's still going on. Like that console war for some people isn't over because it's part of their identity. And that's how you make real money. If you get people so convinced of your product that they start to
Mm-hmm.
integrate it into their personality, and that's why marketing is so uncomfortable for me, because that's where it ends up if it's really successful.
I feel like indie had that, 2012 to 2015, like that. It was there, like playing indie games and like engaging with creators. That was an identity at its
Mm.
peak, and I feel like it's gone away and we've lost that. And is that why do you think that is? It just because we haven't had a multi-million
Nice.
dollar marketing machine like grinding it, or
No, I mean I wasn't really aware of the space at that time. Like I probably started in like 2016. Like I started like to really get into it when it was on its downhill path.
Mhm.
Um, but like honestly, like if we're looking at the remnants of those days, like the people who still enjoy that following and that like cult following, who've retained their fans over such long periods of time, I don't think that's like if I look at those spaces now, they don't seem enjoyable to me. So like I'm kind of happy that it went away in a sense, not financially,
Right.
just emotionally.
Right. I think none of us are happy about the financial the financial dip that's been
Yeah.
happening, right? But yeah, maybe the emotional one, because I think it does lend itself more to creative purism, right? Like if we're now, I mean, you can absolutely still make your gotcha game or whatever that's gonna check all the boxes and try and hit that AAA sub AAA market or whatever. Um, but I do feel like, well, okay, if we're still going to be, if we all agree that we're just gonna keep fucking making games even though it's a death sentence, right?
Yeah.
Then we're kind of free to do what we want. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. But we are not like if you look at the scene or like scene or at the space, there's not, I feel like, as much experimentation as people claim
mhm.
for the space as a whole, right?
That's
Um,
where I just got hung up. Yeah.
yeah, where it's like, yeah, I mean, that's fine. Like, there's no need to be innovative forever or whatever. Like, that gets old quickly on its own. But yeah, I don't know. It's like a kind of identity crisis, I guess, where you're like, okay, so what are we? Are we trying to like go for that Devolver deal, or like I don't know, like the space getting consolidated or has been like I never
Hmm.
experienced it in its heyday, right? So I've just joined a doomsday cult from day one that's just been getting worse and worse every year. I feel where it's like, oh yeah, shit's bad, and there's no real like vision for the future. Which like we're like you said, like it seems like we all still keep making games. just because for like each individual of us, there's no real alternative.
Yeah, what else are we gonna? What
And
else?
at some,
What am I gonna do? I can't do anything
yeah,
else.
yeah,
You
exactly, yeah. And then at some point, like attrition is gonna get to us one by one, and we fade away.
no,
Right?
I
It's
know.
like
I've seen it. I've
you
seen it.
you 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 feel like I couldn't do anything else, and then you realize I have to do something else because that's not working out. It's happened to me a few times.
I mean, is there a prize for being the last one to fall, or how does it work? What are we doing?
You get like a prestige Netflix documentary in 20 years.
Right. The last
Yeah,
India.
yeah. And then like you can use those interview fees to pay your medical debt or something. That's the price you get.
Right, right. Yeah, it's fucking bizarre because if you had told me that indie games was going to end up, they fucking did. They did tell me indie games is going to end up as the traditional starving artist path, and there was so much money and hype and voices and noise and eyeballs on the indie games industry at the time when I entered and kind of hit my peak that I never believed it.
Hmm.
Right?
Yeah,
Never believed it
yeah.
to the effect of making some bad. Totally wish I had saved more. Right? Like those kind of things because like it seemed like it would never end. Right? Um,
Yeah.
and now here we are.
It's like when I like I said, I can only like look back at that period, right? Like I joined like after the peak, or like got invested in the culture after the peak, and when I look at that period, I feel like I think about it in terms of a gold rush,
Mm-hmm.
um, where you could just take a shovel and like take some dirt and make some money. Not to like disparage the
Yes.
games of that time, right?
Yes.
But
My
like
dirt.
it
Yes.
just felt like comparatively easy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, So like that's the framework I see that through, like mentally, and so far it kind of holds up.
Right. Yeah. Yes. And like a gold rush, the devs I've seen who entered with the eyes on the money came in, got a bag, left. Then whoever wanted the bag the second most is gone, and the third most, and so on down the line. But I'm curious then
And
if you've
the
joined so late, so to speak, in 2016. I mean, fucking that's not late, but the what drew you in then? If you see this thing that's if you saw it at the time, did you see it at the time as past its
I
prime?
didn't see it. No. I started making games probably like in 2012 or something, but
Oh,
until
that's
like
peak.
2015, it was just like a hobby thing. Like I never went onto any forum or something like that. I just like had stencil and played around with it sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
or some stuff like that. So like getting okay, this is two parts to that question. I didn't see it as a scene um, until like in 2016 when I got more and more invested and like listened to all of the Rami talks and stuff like that. Um, and then I realized, oh, okay, this is a pretty shitty thing. Like it doesn't seem like it's it's living up to the way it's like presented. Like I watched Indie Game, like that was a pivotal
Yep.
moment for me watching Indie Game the movie, and I was like, holy shit, that's really cool. Not even in terms of the money, but just in terms of like emotional fulfillment.
Mm-hmm.
That like 2/3 of the people in that movie got. And where I was like, I want to have that. But the reason why I went into games was just a lack of options. It's the same as with like why I'm not a big fan of marketing. It's like because I just suck at it, so I just kind of have to hate it. And like I just at the time when I really got into making games, I hated everything except making games. It
Right.
was like a flight response, right? It wasn't like I love making games. I wasn't like pulled towards making games. I was pushed away from everything else.
Interesting. That is very interesting. So then, what did making games provide you? I guess in terms of like clarity or sanity or whatever that when you feel like the rest of the world
Yeah.
is pushing against you, what did it give you?
very complicated problems that I could solve creatively.
Yeah.
Um, where it's like, how do I make a game? Like I still cannot code, right? Like I have written maybe like 2 or 3 lines of code that actually compiled. Like I'm still using visual scripting. I just taught that shit to myself, and it was like a constant puzzle
Hmm.
that gave me the feeling of being good at something.
Yeah.
Um, essentially, because I just uploaded the games to Newgrounds, and like some of the comments were like, the second game the second game I uploaded, I got like a comment that was like this long, and it was just really nice, and that kept me going for like a year. Where I was like, oh shit, this person really liked what I did. That's really cool. Like I did something positive um,
Hmm. Hmm.
in my life, and I want to chase that high. Yeah.
And I know, like, I feel like you said, one of the big things about game development that I mean, that I definitely enjoy is that good feeling you get when you cleverly solve a problem. It's something
Mm,
you don't have once you leave school, right? Like
mm.
it really doesn't come back in real adult life that often.
I never had that in school,
Never.
and I mean, like, where you cleverly solve a problem. Like all of the problems they give you in school are like pre-solved, right? You just have to execute the correct solution in a sense. Um, where like they specific, like I don't know, like I grew up in Austria, so I like went through the Austrian education system. I don't know,
Oh yeah.
maybe it's different in other places. But like if you look at a math example that you get like for the final exam in maths
Right.
that I did in school, I didn't know shit about that. I
Hmm.
just knew how to execute the solution that I learned like from a private teacher the day before, literally. And it's like I just remembered that and executed it. But with making games, it's like I make the problems myself.
Right.
So if I figure out how to make specific problems that I can solve, then the solution is kind of in making the problem. It's this weird cycle where like I create the problems that I then solve, so I have to get really good at creating problems that are solvable.
Oh,
And
that's
so
just
you
a
think on this like much more complicated layer
isn't that
that's much more gratifying.
that's just a beautiful metaphor for life. I make the problems that I have to solve. Um, yeah, no, I guess what I mean with with the school thing was like just that moment when you finally get it right, and you get that little flash of like, oh yeah, I'm fucking
Mm.
I'm smart. I feel smart. I like
Yeah,
that feeling. I like
yeah.
that feeling a
Mm.
lot. I like it so much that I've
Mm.
made it this job. Um, but then it's compounded with, like you said, that emotional reward of, you can solve all the math problems you want in your bedroom and feel really smart, but you can only hand a game to somebody and get a response from them. You can't hand them like, look at this textbook I completed. Um,
Yeah,
is it
yeah.
is
It's like you solve really complicated problems to make simple problems that are fun to solve. uh,
right?
yeah, it's
Uh,
it's it's just a fun thing. It's just really enjoyable.
right then. I guess we should probably talk about some of these games. What were the particularly complex problems that you were facing when you were making Quamp?
How to how to lead a team
Okay.
was hard because I worked with an artist and a coder and a musician who were all amazing, but I was like we got actual funding, like very little, but still like I
Hmm.
paid people to work for me. That was a first. Um, that was a problem that I didn't solve very well, but like that kind of passed over. The problem with Quamp was biggest problem with that game that I had to solve was killing a specific idea that I had for like non-linear level progression. Um,
Interesting.
until very late in the game, you had choices in the levels. So you could go down the hard route or the easy route in a level, and that would lead you to a harder or an easier level, respectively. You would still end up at the same place, but you could choose your path.
Hmm.
So you had a kind of dynamic difficulty that was determined by how well you could beat the challenges in the level currently in. And that was like I have I had written like a half of a scientific work about that. Like I had like huge fucking graphs and like um, pacing stuff, and like I nailed that stuff to my wall. It was so important to me. I was like, this is like I'm framing that like graph of how the game looks in its finished state. That's so important to the experience, and I had to cut it because there wasn't enough time to do it. And it was a shit idea as well. But like that process of realizing and like fighting against my urge was the hardest thing with making QOMP.
I have never been good at that. The killing your darlings in terms of ideas that you hold dear. What I mean, yeah, we all come down to the crunch time wire, whatever deadline, and we've got to make those decisions. But when did you know that you weren't going to be? I mean, well, were you not able to execute on the idea just because of time, or did you come to a moment of realization that it wasn't worth it?
I realized that it was a shit idea. um, like both in terms of execution, because it basically means that I have to design levels that half of the people are never going to play.
Yep.
Um, and in terms of like metaphysical meaning, which is like what I always pay very close attention to in my games, which I don't know, is just like part of the like complicated puzzle I make for myself is like, what does this mean? Like if you were to like there's this thing with like literature where you put really a lot of like effort into deciphering the book and like the sentence structure and like the placement of the semicolons and shit like that. And I make my games expecting that people will play them like that. Um, so that structure was part of this like very high-minded idea of like this is what this spiritually expresses, and I just realized that what it spiritually expresses is not in any way, shape, or form more interesting than what a linear experience would also express.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Um, like because the choices didn't really matter. That's the one part. Is like for me, I just realized it's not necessary and it's kind of stupid to do it. And also in playtests, I just saw people got very confused when a level had two exits. They were like, which one do I pick? And like the the feedback of like, oh, this path is harder and this is easier didn't register. Um,
Huh. Huh. Huh.
so
Huh. Huh. Okay.
well, it
Because
was hard. Like those two things combined with okay, we missed the first deadline. Was like okay, it's time to fucking shut this down.
right. So, but I mean, like the choices matter. I mean, like it's a complex thing to explain to a player through game. If you especially if you're not going to market and pitch it properly,
Yeah.
like through gameplay alone, right?
Yes,
Justifying and explaining
that's the
why a
interesting
choice
problem that
matters.
I set for myself.
That is a
Sorry,
huge
sorry.
fucking no. That is the huge. I guess not. It's not a small problem. Uh, and I think in the framework of QOMP, where it is you know a puzzle platformy kind of adventure thing. Um,
Yeah.
it's not something that people are expecting, right? They're going into the start of this game with this preconception that it's going to be puzzles and I beat the puzzle and I move forward and I can already see myself. I definitely had moments of like, oh wow, when I, like very very beautiful little moments in the game. Getting lost, shrinking, like all these little good stuff. Um, and I
Thank
think
you.
I would have been fine uh, if you had thrown a choice in there, and I would have loved it.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. The average player would not have been ready for it and not have expected it. And it fascinates me that you say this because I mean I know very little about producer, but I look at that and I say, holy shit, there's a lot of fucking choices in this game. And I'm curious
Yes.
how that, I guess, defeat of the idea has kind of, what was the thought process from that moment to starting producer?
It's not directly related. Like it wasn't like I want to like realize this structure
Mm-hmm.
that I had for QOMP. I want to. It wasn't like a direct response. In some sense, it's related, but what fascinates me about Producer, which is based on like Snatcher, which is from like '88. Um, when I played that game, what fascinated me and what is like the driving force behind Producer is this is like the thing where like I can explain it to you why I think it's interesting, but
Mm-hmm.
there's like no relation to any marketable experience. Whereas like what you do in Snatcher is you move through this world through these totally abstract menus, but they're systematic. They're like solid systems that you can interact with however you want, but only if you do specific things the story progresses. Like in some sense that's true for all video games, but
Right.
what happens in Snatcher is because it's so removed and so kind of like steeped in like adventure game conventions, is that it creates this for me it created while playing it this extreme sense of immersion where I just accepted the menu, like this is the way I interact with the world, and then here's this like stuff that's happening in the game, and in between that there was like an infinite world of like possibility, and I
Right.
fucking love that feeling, and I'm trying to recreate that. And now it's funny that you say that because I am building a system in it's I think it's already done. Um, it's doing exactly the thing where it's like it's giving you a choice, and that choice um, is ultimately important in the game, but it doesn't register as a choice. So I'm kind of like, yeah, it's complicated.
No, I get that. I absolutely get that. There's nothing I'm more proud of than the choices in my games that the players neither they still do not understand. You know, seven plus years later, I still see guides and wiki articles on how to do the things the right way, and no, none of them have like really understood what the thing is, and I'm
Yeah.
never gonna fucking explain it. And that's beautiful.
Have you?
That's that metaphysical pleasure I find. I agree with it.
Yeah. Have you played Disco Elysium?
Yeah. I haven't beat it.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
chew. But yes, I had
Yeah.
a
Yeah. Yeah.
lot of fun
Yeah.
with what I did.
Yeah. That's that's doing that to an extent that like is so complicated that nobody even attempted to write a wiki kind of.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
because there's it all feels so in the moment for me when I'm playing that. It's I know that choosing to reveal that I don't know this thing is going to cast some dice of the universe into, you know, to define something about my character. And I found myself choosing more frequently to stay as nebulous as possible, you know, like to keep the breadth of that possibility space as fucking wide as possible, right?
Mm.
Because that we all know games have walls, right?
Mm.
It's not a tabletop RPG with a living human dungeon master. It is predefined, pre-controlled. It is the most deterministic uh, reflection of reality we can
Yeah.
make. But um, for in the brief moments of unknowing, you know, you can really enjoy feeling like, holy shit, I can do anything. Anything is possible, and
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
what I like about
Yeah.
these kind of
That,
games.
that was like my first 2 hours with Disco Elysium. It's probably like the best fucking gaming experience I ever had. It's great.
Right.
I could like I don't know. I could talk about that game forever. It's probably a different thing. It's so good. I love it so much.
Um, let me see. The chat's been actually popping up. I don't know if you're aware of this, but you have the most likes for any industry chats guest announcement, and I of all, which is very very cool.
Hello.
Um,
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of weird to say this, I guess, because those people are probably in the audience right now. But I have a very small group of people who enjoy my work a lot, and
mhm.
who I'm very grateful for like following along, even if my marketing is fucking garbage. You know, like there's a few people who seem to really like what I do, which is nice.
Yeah,
Hello.
I can see. I won't read them out exactly, but I can see the praise reflected in the chat right now, which is quite nice. Uh, uh, yeah. one of the things about QOMP that really stood out to me, and I mentioned it a little bit, is the um, every level has not a new mechanic, but like some new function, some new game element to it. And
Yeah.
that's something I really wanted to talk to you about because do you feel that you didn't you I don't think you have a single two levels that repeat 100% mechanic or you see
No,
mechanics
no, no.
appear again, but like combinations and structure I don't think
Yeah.
you repeated anything. So I'm curious, do you feel that level of variety is essential to making a good game?
No. Not at all.
So then why'd you
It's
do it?
it's actually if like if you talk about mainstream appeal, that's the opposite of what you want to do.
Hmm.
Um, if you want to like make something that people play regularly over long periods of time, that they become like personally attached to, that they invest their identity in, then you want to give them a few things that they can do over like 50 hours.
Right.
But no, it's part of my approach to this stuff where I'm like, this is the thing, right? Like, this is probably also why I can't explain the game because I'm like, this is what's interesting to me. Is like, I have this like core mechanic. How much does that core mechanic contain? That's like the first interesting question. Is like, how much, like, how connected is that shit? Like, I have half a book of like graphs and like mind maps of like possible mechanic combinations. Like, I cut not only the like meta choice thing, but also like 50% of the mechanics I coded for Quant were cut. Like there's a lot of possibility space there. But then the second, after making this like huge bubble of stuff, what's interesting to me, which doesn't mean it's interesting for gamers or does makes a good game, but what's interesting for me is then figuring out how do those things connect and which thing connects to which other thing and like finding out those like little nodes of stuff,
Mm-hmm.
like making like a very complicated map of this shit, and then using that net or that structure or that web to tell a story through gameplay, and that means pacing the stuff very carefully. So it's like the first world of Quant, like the first part of Quant, the first fourth, the first 25% is all about the position of the ball
Mm-hmm.
in relation to the other space. Then the next part is all about impact. Um, and then the next part is all about input. And then the next part is all about a reversion of all of the previous rules. So like it's this very deliberate structure um, where if I repeat myself, I feel like I'm wasting people's time because in my mind everyone is there for the structure,
Right.
which of course nobody fucking is. But like that's what's interesting to me. That's what I focus on. Um, that's like kind of the goal I set for myself to like try to not repeat myself, try to always show a little bit more, and in the end, break it down completely. And through that, say something that's meaningful to me.
Right.
That's the, I'm assuming people are like looking at this game through a very like through a microscope and like analyzing every little bit because most of the little bits have meaning attached to them, which is insane. It's stupid. I'm very lucky that I even finished the game with that approach because that's not how you quickly make games.
It's someone in chat mentions that your games are like poetry, and with this explanation I can understand a little bit more. I think I looked through the game with a microscope, and I I felt the changes in thematic overtones between the stages, but I did not understand them because
Yes.
it does it, in the moment I've got to push the button right at the same time, but
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
it
That's
is.
why I said this is not important to make a good game. This is probably even kind of counterproductive.
But I mean, the definition of good game then, like
Yeah.
we can argue about that or whatever
Yeah.
for a very long time. I think you're right about the having a successful game, we'll say, gives a player an expected experience they can return to over and over and over again. They know what they're going to get. I like Pepsi. I want to drink a Pepsi. Let's go.
Yes.
Yeah. Versus, hi, welcome to my sushi restaurant. I'm going to feed you 13 courses and you have no idea what you're getting.
Yeah. One of them could be poison. Isn't this exciting?
Right. I'm curious also analyzing the level structure and the mechanics that you went for. It feels like sometimes in design there are ideas that are super obvious, almost essentials. When you're exploring the mechanics of being a pong ball, you have to you have to do something. What happens if I bounce off of this thing when it's gonna go away? That's a classic. So I'm curious then, do you ever resist those ideas, those hyper natural, super obvious ideas, or do you just like fully accept and embrace them?
I guess it's like a loop kind of situation where I see like something that's super obvious and I go like, oh, that's super fucking obvious. That's kind of stupid. Mm-hmm. And then I go into like a very complicated direction and get some very convoluted stuff. And then I'm like, how do I simplify that? And then I boil it down. And it's the stupid fucking solution from the beginning. But now in my mind, suddenly it has all of this history attached to it, so it has more meaning. Which is like this designer brain thing, right? Like if you spend like I did, like multiple months designing levels, and each fucking pixel in that like level is gonna carry some emotional meaning to you. Mm-hmm. And then in translation, like you said, like you're pressing the button to make the ball go bonk. It's lost, which is totally fine, right? Is like that's the thing. Like I'm at the point now where I can make games because I enjoy making games, and I don't want that to go away for ever. Yeah, I want that to stay there, and that means I have to do bad marketing decisions.
I mean, yes, or have that taken care of. I hate the fucking create or survive, or you can't do both. It's not a cool, not a cool joke of the universe.
You're referring to the idea that you can either create or sell and nothing in between, and that's stupid, because I agree with that. Yeah, I just find myself aligned very much with the create spectrum and have a lot of sympathy for that perspective because it allows me to not have to think about stuff that I don't want to think about.
Right.
Yeah, but I agree, it's stupid, and I've been getting better at it. I just don't like it, so I have to rant about it on the internet.
It's okay. You come to the right place. It's do you? This is okay. I'm hesitant to ask the question, but do you find a spiritual fulfillment in this depth of exploration in game design, in creating?
It's the loop again. I definitely did. And then I thought that like placing that much value on like making the ball go boink is kind of stupid. And now I'm at a point where like, yeah, it is kind of stupid, but like placing value in everything else also like is kind of stupid if you look at it like long enough. So like basically if you look at anything long enough, it can become both very meaningful to you and both like absolutely meaningless. And I just have to be careful to not get too sucked in either direction, to like not hate it too much and not to love it too much, and kind of like try to like spiritually. I think the biggest problem I'm struggling now is like expanding my horizon to like encompass experiences that don't involve making games. Or like thinking about making games, or like seeing everything through the perspective of making games, like
right. Right.
um,
Yeah,
kind
that
of
you're
going
having
away
an
from
idle
that.
conversation and you're like, oh, that would be a great game idea. Yes. Um,
I've moved past that stage, but I can feel it calling to me sometimes. Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, I don't like getting away from that. It feels cold the further away I get from that feeling, wherever it's all consuming and it feels like literally I'm doing the most important thing in the universe. I'm making this game the way it has to be made because it's literally the universe demands it. It is the most critical thing possible in all of the cosmos, and it is my divine purpose. Like I have this is the thing,
Yeah.
and it does feel cold getting further and further away from that, but
Yeah.
uh, feel more
But
human.
it's I mean, hmm. I like to visualize things. Like I kind of think in like arrows with directions and shit.
Hmm.
So like if you say you have this like central thing that's so important to you and you're moving away from it, right? That means you're still looking at it while you're moving away from it. If like it's still the center of your universe, right? So if you would just fucking turn around, there'd be something else there that you
Right.
could go towards, right? Like um, that's yeah, yeah. I feel like that's been part of like a life lesson that games have taught me. Like you can really hug the sun, but you
Yeah.
will fucking burn. And if you turn around, there's another sun in the distance, and you can go to that, and that will probably also burn you. You just have to kind of decide what you want to hug and what you want to run away from. I don't know. I don't know.
I mean, isn't that like I told myself that's what makes good game is hugging the sun is going like
Burning?
burning, right?
Yeah,
Um,
not necessarily. That's the thing. It doesn't relate. Like in the mind of consumers, right? Like consumers. Um, in my mind, right? Like some of the stuff that I find intense pleasure in was like created on accident or like is just there because it is there, right? Like the trees don't grow to impress me.
yeah.
They grow in like an incredible struggle for survival, and I can look at them and go like, huh, that's kind of fun, you know. Or I can get really invested into trees and like try to make them grow faster and shit. I don't know. I I I, I feel like the approach of like you have to hug the sun to like make a good game is what in the short term really works to like make yourself better at stuff. That's something I've experienced, right? Like I said before, I was I was making games because I had nothing else. So all I did was make games, and I got better at it.
Hmm.
Like, of course I did because I did nothing else, but I got worse at everything else. And yeah,
Yeah, the temperance in existence is a hard thing to learn over time, especially if you've been like willing to dive so hard into a passion that you let other things go to the wayside. It can be hard to like
I don't know.
pull back. Um,
Yeah,
how has the process been for you? Uh, have you struggled with it at all?
but like pulling back. Yeah, intensely,
Letting go
and
of the
like
sun.
yes, I did. I had to let go because I got burned. Basically, I like if game development was a school, I'd have dropped out in like 2019, and I just was like, I fucking love this, but it's killing me.
Hmm.
And I quit for some time, and I got like a really bad job at a hostel, and I went on like medication because I was like really deep gone. Like I was psychotic. I had like paranoid uh, symptoms, not because I'm like inherently paranoid, but because I was just so fucking stressed out all the time.
Hmm.
And that was like a pivotal moment, like taking those medications, really, which I've been like pushing against for years before because it's really scary to like
Yep.
alter your
Yep.
brain chemistry in that way. I did it, and I realized like, oh wow, I can like I can go to the supermarket without being afraid. I think I've lost you. Am I back?
You're back. There you are.
Okay, okay. What was the last thing
You can
you
go to the
you?
supermarket without being afraid.
Yeah, and that was like it's like that's the level of like intensity at which I was hugging the sun. Like I was afraid of
Hmm.
going to the supermarket. It was that bad.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
And
understand. Yeah.
and
Weird paranoid habits and rituals, and like looking
yeah,
back on it, man, it just seems like pure insanity. And I
yeah,
uh, try not to begrudge myself uh, having gone through that, because
yeah,
it's what the world at the time it felt like the world demanded of me.
yeah.
um
That's that's the problem, right? Like that's why people who like work at Naughty Dog go like, you have to kill yourself to make a good game, right? Because they know nothing else,
mhm.
and because it actually works. um, the the important thing is you don't have to make a game, so there's no need to kill yourself
Right.
for
Yeah,
one.
yeah. um and yet I can't see myself doing anything else.
Yeah, but there's like yeah, like I said, I think in like arrows and shit. Like I'm currently thinking a lot about the idea of a push and a pull force, right?
Mm.
So like something can either push you away from something or like pull you towards something. And like I made games because I was like pushed away by everything else. And then for some time I made games because I wanted to like get to the center of it and like pulled myself into it. And having experienced both directions, I can kind of like now feel when the when one direction is becoming too intense and
Right.
kind of work with that.
How do you work with that as advice for somebody who's still sometimes struggling with it, the navigation? How do you
That's
when you feel it's coming too strong from one side, what do you do?
um I remind myself of all the times where it felt like that before. And I it's there's this great quote by Haruki Murakami, like in one of his books, he like constantly repeats that phrase, which is like, if you don't understand it with an if you don't understand it without an explanation, then you will not understand it with an explanation, right? Like these feelings and these moments and these like experiences are so intense and multifaceted and like personal
Hmm.
that I cannot translate them. I can only like describe what happened to me, and people can connect to that or not connect to that. But I can't tell you how to figure that out for yourself, because if I
Yeah,
could, I wouldn't be making games. I'd be rolling in money selling self-help books, right?
right. I also I think because so much of it is not it doesn't even just come from like the universal creator syndrome or whatever we'll call it, but the like it's tied to personal life and history and lived experiences in a way that like I can never fully explain to anybody, or I will never fully, like, we might have common touchstones, but like it's so
Yes.
wrapped up in that movie of your whole life that plays in your head. um
Yeah.
it can't be decoupled.
But there's a real comfort when you're extremely lost and then you find someone who has that same touchstone, and then you realize like, oh shit, right? Like here's this one thing that's kind of a weird abstraction of what I'm going through now,
Mm-hmm.
but it's like a solid thing, and then someone else goes like, I know that, right? And then you're like, oh shit.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
those moments are really good. So I guess my advice for people who are struggling with that shit is to talk to people that you don't know yet. Talk to new people.
Talk to
That
new
was one of the core things that like helped me,
Yeah,
talking to other people.
yeah, it's good. um yeah, man, I
Come on
appreciate.
this show.
Yeah. Come on, that's what I was about to say. I really appreciate you coming on the show and being a new person to talk to. uh is very, very good. I quite appreciate it. I one of my favorite things is the pure bliss happenstance of how how we reconnected through the fucking samurai gun open lobby.
Oh shit, yeah.
Beautiful.
You beat me, right? Man, Samurai Gun.
You beat me first. I wanted the rematch.
Yeah, but you were lagging, right? Like I think you said later,
I
like
was
you
in
were
the
getting some
bathroom.
water or something. I think I got a few cheap kills.
It was very good. Man, but dude, it was really good having you on, and I really appreciate
we,
this
we, we,
conversation.
we didn't even get to talk about how we met, which you apparently don't remember, which is
I
totally
no no
fine.
yes, tell in these closing moments, please tell
Okay.
me the story of how we met.
We met in 2017 at Amaze Johannesburg, which was a festival where I was showing an early version of QOMP. Funnily enough, I've been working on this game for like multiple years and like trying to get it finished. And the publisher I was working for at the time sent me there, and it was like my first international gaming convention. I was super lost and super weirded out. I didn't know the like social rules or like how shit worked. I was scared of everyone. There were like JW was there. I was like, oh my god, JW, holy shit! Oh, like how will I ever face him? And, and we were smoking, and I was like, so yeah, so what do you do? And you were like, oh, I'm a security guard here, and you pretended to be a security guard. That's how we met.
Sounds right. Actually, now that you mentioned it, that sounds 100% right.
Yeah.
Did it? It was better than say because I got so fucking tired of the same conversation. And you've had that conversation. What do you do? I'm a game developer. Oh, what's your game? My game's this. Oh, cool. My game's that. And you never get to fucking talk to a human. So I decided I was gonna pretend to be a security guard at that show, and it was cool.
It was fine. The thing is, I didn't know that experience, right? Like you were coming into the situation probably super jaded, which then like 3 years later, that could have been me, right? I mean, and I never did that, but you were coming in super jaded, and I was coming in like super like, what the fuck is this space? But then we talked, right? And through the whole convention, whenever I'd see you around, because we were both smoking at the time, I think, I would come up to you and I would like ask you for a lighter or some shit, just because I felt like, oh, there's one person I talked to who like didn't, I don't know, who I wasn't scared of, I guess.
Good. That makes me really happy.
And then, oh, I mean, that was super nice. I was super weirded out by you pretending to be a security guard, and I don't know how you resolved that situation. That felt super weird. But and then maybe to close off the show, I can describe the last time we saw each other before today was I was standing in front of the hotel I was staying in Johannesburg, and one of the guys from Free Lives was driving by, and like just stopped the car in the middle of the road, and was like, "Oh yeah, nice seeing you, blah blah blah. Let's go." And you were like sitting in the back of a car or something, like completely silent. And he was like, "Yeah, we're going to the desert to do a game jam," and then you just sped off into the distance.
Yeah, that sounds about right for that point in my life.
Yeah.
The
And for a long time, I've kind of like treasured the feeling of the like life experience you projected. I don't know what it was actually like, right? There's been like something I've been thinking about for some time.
Yeah, it was a very good period of my life. I will say. The fun fact is that the organizers of Amaze Joburg until the last day of the show didn't know I was a game dev. That was fun.
Okay, fun. My fun thing about the organizers of Joburg is that we just went there without having an invitation or a slot.
Yeah.
We just went there. We just went to fucking South Africa and we're like, hey, we have a game, can we exhibit it? And they were like, okay.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's such a good show. Yeah. It's probably one of my favorite festivals. Yeah, man, good. That's very good storytelling. I'm very glad you told because I like I said, like that part of my life, very good. but my memory of it is horrible. It is so bad for I
Yeah, I
think
mean,
relatively obvious reasons. But yeah, man, that was so nice. Oh, dude, I'm so glad you came on. I'm so glad we got to talk. Uh,
yeah, like yeah. Don't worry about the memory thing. I have the same thing. And like, there's no reason to feel bad about forgetting people when you meet like 200 every day. I was like, whatever happens.
guys, we're gonna tail off now. You got follow Wombat stuff on Twitter. Which apparently you put out like 2+ hours of gifs last year over the last couple of years. With it,
Yeah,
that's
that's that's
that's good. Like,
that was my obsessive phase. That was that's the product of where I was like, I have to make games or I'll die. And I made 2 hours of games.
it's good. It's good. I watched. I didn't watch all 2 hours. It's a long watch,
No,
but
no, no, no,
it's
nobody should. Nobody should. That's a horrible idea.
dive into QOMP, guys. It's good. It's not gonna drag on forever. You're gonna have a good experience, and I do really recommend the game. And I'm gonna look forward to producer
Cool.
when
Yeah,
it's out.
me too. I hope it turns out okay.
Right on. Thank you again, and I guess goodbye, everybody. We'll see
Yeah.
you sometime. Bye.
Bye bye. Thanks for stopping.